Here we are. Here we are for EV Lies Exposed. And we're here at YEV. YEV, Kevin.
Why not?
Exactly. Why the hell not? So we are at the live podcast for specifically EVs today. Just waiting for Alex to jump on. He's a bit late, as per usual, sorting out the kids, which is normal every week, really. But Kev, do you want to give us a bit of an intro in terms of why we're talking about what we're talking about?
So basically, I think it's just really to talk about all these EV myths that really should die, but they still persist in. I mean, it started really by a LinkedIn post I did about my car passing its first MOT. And I put the tyre depth and stuff just to show they don't actually go through that. And I mentioned, just in passing, the brakes are still at 8 mil. And the amount of hate I got from that post from people saying the brakes are dangerous on an EV and regen should be banned and all these things. So it's just, I mean, that's a new myth I've heard. I've never heard of someone saying that the brakes will seize, they won't work when you need them, and they'll warp the discs. It's like, really? It's like, I've never heard of that.
No, what I found quite amusing, I think it was one of the comments in there saying that all of those things, and you have to service the brakes all the time because you're using regen all the time, which it's recommended that when a vehicle, when an EV is in, that you should check them. And I know that Cleveland EV are keen on doing this for when it's serviced, but like you said with the pads, I mean, I've seen so many examples of electric cars that are 80 to 100k, and they are still on the same pads. And mine was when it was hitting sort of 100k until I decided to upgrade them. But what other negative comments and sort of craziness were in that post, Kev?
That was the big one, and then suddenly it's like, why are people being forced? Why do you need to prove that EVs work? And it's like, well, it's not trying to prove anything. It's just literally a post. It's so many people that you think, well, why'd you comment? Just scroll on to the next thing if you really don't want one. I mean, I think that's the big thing is they've made it a big thing about the ZEV mandate. But again, still people aren't being forced into an EV as such, because if you look at it, it still allows hybrids. So it's not, I think it's that sort of thing that people don't want to be forced, and I just don't really get it. I mean, it'd be interesting to see in the comments, what's the weirdest EV myth the audience has actually heard?
That's a good shout. What have people heard in terms of EV myths that made you laugh and fall off your chair onto the floor? I mean, it's like, electric cars are the Betamax, and soon people will be laughing at the people that went electric because hydrogen and petrol and diesel cars will be back. And and what people got to realize, and I'm really fortunate enough to be in the position where I'm seeing it firsthand from a HGV and van point of view, because we do simulations as part of the software that I sell essentially with Dynamon Zero. And it's really amazing to see that, there's lots of companies out there trying to give hydrogen a go, but there's so many negatives to it. And in the UK, I really don't see it actually taking on at all, because the cost of the infrastructure, Elon Musk and Tesla, they put that infrastructure in, and that's the main reason why electric cars are doing so well today. But hydrogen infrastructure is so expensive, and hydrogen itself is expensive, especially green. Bearing in mind there's about 10 colors. I'm not going to go through them all now because but one of them. Oh, here we go. Dean's got something in here. Let's have a little look. I had a Leaf at 6 years old and 80,000 miles. My brakes failed and warped my disc due to the fact that I hadn't removed the pads and lubricated them in 6 years, even though loads of life left on the pads. Lessons learned. So there we go. There's an example of brakes failing, but like you said, they hadn't been checked. So lubricated and taking out the pads, putting them back in. So good example there, Dean. Thank you. MOT mechanic said my 3.5 ton Model 3 is trashing the road.
3.5. A lot of luggage in that Model 3, because I'm sure it's about 1.9 tons, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, I think that's the long range. I'll have to double check that if anyone who knows, or someone whacks on Google, because we don't want to stop the progress of the conversation. Have a look. But yeah, I mean, this reminds me actually that the police don't tend to use Tesla Model 3s for their vehicles because the actual load capacity, the weight isn't as good as the Kia EV6, Ioniq 5, and Polestar. Because I was talking to one of the main police guys, I can't remember his name now, but he was transport police. And they said that, you know, the Teslas are great, but they just can't quite take the weight. So the fact that your MOT guy said 3.5 tons, I mean, surely you should know better. But, you know, some people in the motor trade are very clueless. Go on, Kev.
Actually, an EV9 isn't even that heavy. And
No,
that's a big thing.
That's 2.8 tons, I think.
Yeah, I think and that's the big all-wheel drive one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big old unit, but then again, it is still really, really efficient. So efficient. I think many people. We've got Bernard Charlesworth here saying, I think many people see BEVs as outside their comfort zone. Absolutely. So, you know, it's what people, you know, scare them because they don't understand it, and that's the thing, Bernard. You're absolutely bob on there. Sorry, Kev, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is actually, you look at it. I mean, at the moment, I'm in a plug-in hybrid, but it's one of the next generation plug-in hybrids, and that's only 1,850 kilos. So, I mean, and that just as well shows how the technology has moved on. So the plug-in hybrid I'm in now goes further purely electric than our first EV. I mean, to be fair, it has a bigger battery.
Are you allowed to share the results of that one, Kev?
So which one? Yeah, I can just be on LinkedIn. Yeah. So basically, I've got a plug-in hybrid. I was issued a challenge with it because
Kev loves a challenge.
The garage said it's actually quite good because I'm reluctant to, you know, I'll accept that they're a gateway to EV, but I was told it was really good. And actually, they said, could you get 100 miles out of a single charge? And I got just 100 miles out of a charge on purely electric without it starting the engine, which when you think that's some of the early EVs didn't do that, Nissan Leafs and stuff. I mean, and I think probably that if plug-in hybrids had been like that in the beginning, we may not have all this hate around EVs because people would have got used to the electric thing maybe without sort of subtly, and then they'd like, oh well, I may as well go full electric. Yeah. But yeah, it's mad that it can do that, but it does have a 24 kilowatt hour battery pack. I think there must be about 20 kilowatt hours usable. But
well, this seems to be the new thing with plug-in hybrids: much bigger batteries, much bigger range. So yeah, I think you're right. It's if people see that actually I've not been using my engine at all, or that once or twice that I went on holiday to Cornwall maybe, but actually if I go for electric vehicle with 75 kilowatt hours, then actually that's more than doable. And as I probably said, I think last week, that public charging infrastructure is so good now, so good. I mean, I went to one recently, and they're putting even more chargers in. Yes, okay, you know, the price of it can come down. I mean, 69p is probably the cheapest non-Tesla chargers I've seen. That was Gloucester Services that I've been to recently. And, you know, bearing in mind, petrol stations at service stations are extortionate anyway. They're at least sort of 20 pence per litre more than like standard prices anyway. But let's just jump into the comments. So just goes to show the FUD is out there. Yes, indeed. X-Files. Yeah, Chris, thanks. Yeah, 1,828 kilograms for the long-range Tesla Model 3.
So it's almost two then, that the mechanic says.
Yeah.
You have to buy two Model 3s, maybe stack them for that weight.
So they're modular, you know. Payload 413 kilograms. Wow, it's a lot lower than I thought it was. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't think my recently discovered tow bar on the Tesla Model 3 is going to do much good. Yeah, there we go. Model 3 long range all-wheel drive is indeed 1.9 tons. I do remember stuff sometimes. So yeah, I must admit, and myself and Kev were talking about this earlier, you know, I'm getting a little bit worn down. I think I need an injection of you know, positivity on the EV front at the moment, because there does seem to be so much EV hate and EV FUD out there. What else have you experienced out there, Kev, in terms of kind of the FUD and the myths?
I mean, the biggest thing is still every time there's a fire, it's blamed on an EV, and it's like they're not necessarily going to be the, you know, they're less likely to catch fire. And yeah, it's true, you know, in the interest of balance, if a lithium-ion battery is on fire, it is harder to extinguish than a petrol fire because we're more equipped to put out the other type of fires. We've not mastered the techniques to do the lift, and it's kind of self-sustaining because all the fuel's in there. So, but I think, they're so less likely to do that. I mean, the biggest thing is it's starting to affect sort of insurance companies and things like that. I mean, I have noticed, isn't it with insurance companies, isn't it one state in America that now won't insure the Cybertruck? Is it New York?
Oh, really? Even after it got blown up and it's still, the battery was still fine.
It's repairability is quite difficult apparently on it, and insurers don't like repairability issues.
I think is it Whistling Diesel that goes around breaking vehicles on purpose, and he really did his best to destroy that Tesla Cybertruck. He recently destroyed a Rolls Royce. I don't know if anyone's seen that video. It's horrific.
And a G-Wagon as well.
Oh, really? Oh, I've not seen that one. That's interesting. Oh, there we go. Dean's mentioned IonT Bristol charger, 56 pence per kilowatt hour on a 50 kilowatt charger. Yeah, I mean, 50 kilowatt charge is great for your e-Golf and, Nissan Leaf if they haven't got CHAdeMO with the adapter, and quite a lot of EVs out there.
And if you're not in a rush. If you're there for, 45 minutes having a snack or something, that's not actually an issue, is it? Because I mean, I found I've struggled with some of the services when I was there, when I had the N a couple of weeks ago. I didn't have time to eat my burger because I'm like, I only wanted to get to 80%. It's charging too quick. It's costing me money.
Funnily enough, I was waiting for some friends. I plugged in and I had to unplug because we went to go and get some food. And, you don't want any extra charges because they are quick, depending on the charger in the vehicle, of course, because you've got to check their top charging speed. But yeah, it's what really gets me is welcome aboard, Alex. What really bugs me is when people who don't know how EVs work so much will say, yeah, it takes 2-3 minutes to fill up my ICE car. And it's like to do 600 miles. I'm thinking that is just a load of bullshit. It doesn't take that long. It takes much longer. I mean, definitely sat at the pump for like 5 minutes, that sort of size tank. It must be a really, really small tank. Then you've got to go and pay. Then you've got to, you have to do quite a lot. Whereas my Tesla, plug it in. By the time you've grabbed a coffee, gone to the toilet, 10 minutes, that gives you a 100-mile range. And yes, okay, it is a bit longer at the moment, but the technology is just going so quick at the moment. Different battery chemistries, which are not only becoming safer from NMC to the LFP, removing cobalt. The phone companies don't talk about, trying to remove cobalt from the phones or electrical devices, but the EV
get chucked into landfill.
Say again, sorry.
And they get chucked into landfill after a few years.
Yeah, vapes. There's vapes as well.
Vapes. Absolutely, yeah. So I'm recycling is really, really important. I think I saw also, EV batteries, they can't be recycled. I mean, again, I saw a recent report that you can now recycle, I think it's like 98% of the lithium and carbide. Carbide is a really important element of these batteries because it's actually quite difficult to mine and get hold of. I think there's only a few places to get it. That can be all recycled. It's not the fact that you're putting fuel in the car and then it turns into, whatever fumes and it's gone. These batteries are recyclable. You can repurpose them again. You don't have to extract all the raw materials out of the ground, which everyone's got a problem with. So, yes, okay, there is the initial extraction, but then they can get recycled, repurposed into more batteries. And this is something that, funnily enough, Jaguar are doing with their new vehicle. Very interested to see how that turns out, especially after all the craziness in the press recently. But yeah, in terms of their particular car, they're focusing on recycled batteries to make their new batteries, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the announcements that the manufacturers have made, solid state they're starting to go into production for solid state batteries. I mean, Hyundai announced, was it this week? I think Alex will correct me if I'm wrong. They announced that they're going to go into production with solid state batteries. MG's like premium division that's coming out. So is it Innovation in Motion, IM, which I think is Innovation in Motion. Their premium car is going to be a semi-solid state battery, and that's due out next year. So that's going to be production. So these are all much safer battery technologies as well. That the fire risk is reduced even further.
Well, funnily enough, as I come back from transport event, I saw one of these in the car park, a Skywell, which is an IM vehicle. So you don't see many of those out there, do you?
That's an is it AIM? No, it's IA, isn't it? Innovation Autos.
Oh, okay, I got it wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, IM is Innovation in Motion, which is going to be MG's version of Lexus.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just go through the comments while we've got a few in here. So Malcolm's mentioned pod point are usually 60. We were talking about public charging a minute ago. Pod point are normally 62 pence per kilowatt hour, 50 kilowatt charger, 49 pence on a 22, which are ideal for Zoe's. No, absolutely. And fires. This is really interesting. Set fire to a battery in the cabin was unburnt on the Tesla Model 3. The video under writer's laboratory, testing electric car fires by deliberately. Oh, run out there.
That's a good one.
EV comment is EVs are too that really winds me up. EVs are too expensive. Then in 2023, when secondhand they became bargains, they'd appreciate too much. I don't want one.
Too expensive and too cheap. Which one is it?
Look,
it depends
you can get a really good electric car for $5,000 now. You really can, and you can get much better, range, 200 plus range electric vehicles from £8,000 now. You can get a Tesla Model 3 for $10,000 now. They're not expensive anymore. And you compare that to a petrol auto comparable car in terms of performance, safety, and all the rest of it. The electric cars are always better value. Yes, okay, if you haven't got a driveway, it's probably not ideal unless you've got charging at work or you have got a local charger, which is a good price. Bearing in mind the savings of servicing and the longevity of the vehicles and the saving on brakes. We mentioned that earlier with what Kevin was talking about. Let me just finish through the comments and then we'll let Alex talk about why he's late today, and he's going to get a black mark against his name. Falling out the bottom of the Tesla Model 3, inside of vehicle not burnt out. Mackie Bolt Kona burnt out apparently. Interesting. What's this? Schrodinger's EVs simultaneously too expensive and too cheap. Yes, indeed. I heard that there were some potions going on, Alex.
Some potions? Oh God, yeah, don't get into that. Not this evening, but yes, in general in life. No, this evening was just traffic and rain and floods everywhere, and two kids who were taking a long time to sort out. We went for food. It's taken a while to get back. One of them just walked into the room in the background. So
it's a bit like that news interview where it's like, get out.
Frequently, yeah.
We were just talking at the beginning, myself and Kevin, all about what recent EV myths that you've heard that had you fallen off your chair.
So yeah, it was interesting. I'm guessing from comments that fires have come up. I mean, the fire thing is really interesting. I mean, I've done quite a lot of interviews with various different people on this. I'm gonna just pick out some highlights. There's always the kind of the fires thing is always one of these things that never fairly gets discussed from either side. My sense is that the data suggests there is a very much lower risk of them catching fire. Equally, if they do catch fire, it's obviously a much bigger problem. And the data is slightly skewed at the moment on account of the fact that you're comparing a fleet of ICE vehicles that are much older on the whole to EVs that are generally speaking newer. I don't think that's going to move the needle too far in either direction. But equally, obviously, for the sake of being balanced, there is a little bit in that. I interviewed a few years ago, DEKRA over in Germany, and they were doing some really high speed. I mean, like, I think 50, 60 miles an hour sideways into a pole. And these cars were bananaed around the pole and didn't catch fire. But they were saying, I'm sure it was DEKRA who was saying that they've actually had to they've got things for extracting the vehicles as quickly as possible out of the workshop after a crash test. But they say the only difference with handling an EV is that with a petrol or diesel car, if it's going to catch fire, it catches fire straight away. With an EV, it can catch fire 24 hours, 48 hours after an accident. That's the big difference with the two. As I say, just adding some just adding some context in from that point of view.
We love a balanced chat. That's what it's all about. Yeah,
but it's interesting. I mean, the cost thing I find fascinating as well. I mean, again, that's yeah. I mean, there's an argument in that in terms of I mean the whole I'm seeing an awful lot at the moment about I tell you what, this leads on quite nicely from where I'm getting to. Lots of kind of conversations at the moment about how there's no demand for EVs. That's the one that always rattles my chains at the moment, because my goodness, that is a very deep and difficult conversation to be having.
Actually, this comment here will apply to Alex, because I'm sure he's been out in an Alpha Junior in the rain. Are you? I mean, you don't look very electrocuted.
It neither caught fire nor broke down nor did anything that was untoward. No, I'm driving around an Alfa Romeo Giulia electric this week. Nice little car. Where was I? Oh yeah,
leading on to something.
Demand falling. So it's interesting that you can actually plot this with the aid of DFT stats. Is that
what was that? Department
for Transport, yeah. So they have data on all of this, and if you look at new registrations on a month-by-month basis, fleet tracks upwards, retail is tracking upwards, and it stops, and then it flatlines, and it dips off. Now it stops. It starts to flatline at the start of 2022, and then it tails off through 2023. Now, a lot of things happened at the start of 2022 with things like rising energy bills and rising interest rates. Cars got more expensive. I don't think there's a flattening of demand for EVs. I suspect there is a flattening of demand in retail for new cars in general, because the cost of them has gone up, and I think because there is still a price premium for EVs. I think that's hit them first.
It's funny you say that, because I was watching a podcast. I think Petrolped was in it, who is kind of positive EV, even hates the name, and they were talking about Porsche 911 prices, saying that now new Porsche 911s, they're giving discounts, and you hear all this stuff about depreciation of electric vehicles, but like you said, I think it is just generally speaking, it's hard at the moment, I think financially, and I think everyone's kind of suffering, well, majority of people. Just before you carry on, this is a classic. The takeaway delivery guy told me last night, I don't own the battery, I just rent it. I don't know who I'm paying rent to. Do you? I do hear some strange comments since owning my Tesla Model 3. I think that's probably, he's obviously heard that from a Nissan, Renault Zoe, and actually Nissan Leaf owners, because there was a small percentage of battery lease vehicles out there, and he's taken that and he's run with it. It's all these whispers. This is the issue. Sorry, Alex, I butted in there.
No. Some quite interesting points, I think, coming up in the questions as well with this. The one that I like that comes up regularly is anything that uses those same DFT stats to try and imply that there are shortages of certain things or hotspots of demand in certain areas. So I had a great one last year suggesting that there was a severe shortage of charging points in Stockport. And another one in Slough, one in South Gloucestershire. These are all hotspots of EV ownership, and technically they are, but they are because that's where the biggest leasing companies in the UK are based. So Lex Autolease, which is the UK's, was until recently the UK's largest leasing company. It's now been two others have joined together.
LeasePlan Lex has made Avons. Yes.
No, LeasePlan and ALD have made Avons, but yeah, they're now the biggest, with Lex in second place. But their fleet is still split across South Gloucestershire and Slough. So you quite often see stuff going. There was one a couple of years ago where it was saying that if you lived in Slough, you'd have to wait a certain number of hours on average for a rapid charger because there was a severe shortage in that area. And you just think it's not that hard to look up. A lot of these vehicles are still first owner is a leasing company, like they're owned there. They may never have been to Slough in their entire time. They just happen to be registered to that leasing company.
You pick up a really good point there, because you're talking about waiting for chargers, and I think there's been a lot of negativity. And I'm not going to mention the YouTube channel or the specific person, because we know who we're talking about.
I was going to say he may be mentioned in the comments.
Well, funnily enough, the last I was on with Tesla Jigsaw, and it's like, yeah, that YouTuber, and he didn't want to mention his name, and then afterwards it was the same person that we often talk about. And I've only ever waited once for a charger, and I do my car's done 120,000 miles now, and I've done 60,000 the last 3 years. And yeah, I mean, just to prove to everyone, you can't see it quite, but yeah, there we go, 120,001. That happened today. So yeah, in terms of waiting for chargers, what about you guys? Have you ever waited for a charger at all?
I think we waited for the same charger on the same event. The longest I've ever waited for a charger was about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But that was an exaggerated use study, because that was
send 50 cars around Scotland on exactly the same route at exactly the same time,
and then have a bank of chargers at the end point of that day fail, or there was something to do with not being able to access them, and you basically ended up with a pocket of, I arrived and there was already 2 cars waiting for the charger, one of which decided to fully charge in the middle of rural Scotland, and I think Kevin was 2 or 3 cars behind me on the same event. But other than that, no. I mean, I haven't waited since, the good old days of waiting for plug-in hybrid Outlanders at Ecotricity stops 10 years ago. That was the last time I've waited. I came back from Heathrow on, I went to and from Heathrow in the Alpha last week. It's not a car with a massive amount of range. 180 to 200 miles I was getting range-wise. On the way up, I dipped into Reading services, literally comfort brake, came back out, just put like a little bit of extra range in it, did the loop because I was having it valet parked, and you never know what people are going to drive the cars like when you give them the keys. And actually, it came back with the temperature set to high and all the rest of it. It was all the stuff that was wrong. And I was like, yeah,
put the heating on.
don't muck around with it. Put the heating on, but no, I'm bloody high. Anyway, I then on the way back, I was like, well, I've got a couple of emails to do. I'll go and grab something to eat in Reading services again, plug it into the Tesla charger, and I'll sit in my car for 15-20 minutes and do some work. By the time I'd eaten, I was pretty much like, well, there's no point in me getting my laptop out because I'm going to be done in 5 minutes. So yeah, it's the sense that you need 400 miles of range and all this sort of stuff is hugely distorted by the fact that, people are used to that in their petrol or diesel cars, and actually it's because you have to use those in a different way. And actually, if a petrol or diesel car with 200 miles of range would be an absolute pain in the backside to own, because every couple of 100 miles you'd have to go and find somewhere to fill it up. If you can charge at home, and that's the important bit, obviously, the range isn't an issue most of the time, unless you're doing massive miles. And even then, a lot of cars these days, it's not really a big deal.
I've heard a rumor that the Mustang Mach-E can do 569 miles to a single charge.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
Superhuman. Well, I was out with BMW looking at Neue Klasse Tech on. So this is their new line of vehicles with their 6th generation EV powertrain on Thursday, and they haven't revealed full kind of charging specs, but one of the stats that caught my eye on that was they reckon you'll be able to get 300 kilometers, so 186 miles in 10 minutes, range back. And they focus very much on efficiency, and their take on things like solid state, just to bring this full loop, is that you may not actually need to have significantly faster charging than that anyway. I mean, once you get to the point where you're able to get 186 miles in a 10-minute break, how much,
what voltage is that at?
800. It's 800 volts.
And what, 300 kilowatt max charging speed?
They didn't say maximum charging speed. They've only given a few stats away, but yeah,
they always give the 10 to 80. But for me, I always want to know. But I suppose it's not continuous depending on the charger. But
they've not said 10 to 80 even. They've just said maximum charging speed is 186 miles in 10 minutes. So I mean, obviously that's going to be quite low. That's from quite a low state of charge. It's going to, I would imagine, tail off a little bit after that. But yeah.
Well, Chris Creasy's never waited in 40k. That's impressive. This is a really interesting one. Dean, still forgotten your t-shirt. Goodness mate. Right, I will take it out, mate. Sorry. Speaking about EV fires, have you seen the Renault's invention of a water inlet port that the fire brigade can pump water directly into the battery to stop the fire quicker? Interesting solution. And also something interesting to that from my last video, 2 videos ago, the Felton Second Life battery skid, the Charge Cube with the Q, they have exactly the same technology. So yeah, I think that that sounds like that should be standard on all vehicles. There should be some sort of.
It's like we were talking about earlier, isn't it? Where, you know, it's not that they can't put fires out. It's just they haven't evolved the technology and techniques to put them out. Whereas petrol and diesel cars have been around for long enough to have the methods and the sort of the ways of putting them out. Whereas an electric car now, they're just going to evolve and do that. Because I mean, they're going to have to evolve things like that for motorsport, aren't they, as well? Because eventually motorsport will be EV, and inevitably they will have big crashes at some point, and you'll need to be able to put those fires out quickly. I mean, was it IndyCar that used to have invisible fires because they were using methanol and stuff? So the person would be on fire and you wouldn't see the flames or anything. Sure, it was IndyCar, wasn't it, that used
a little bit warm at this race, yeah. Guys, I'm gonna have to jump on this one because it's like red rag to a bull for this. So there's some confusion about buying a pre-owned Tesla and either low age or low mileage. What do you think? Right, from the data out there, this was confirmed from Altelium. Again, did a video on them about their battery warranty and battery testing. It's more on age than it is on mileage, and it'd be really interesting to see if anyone watched RS Simmons' YouTube channel. He's recently bought a 216,000 mile Tesla Model 3 long range, 71 plates, a 2021 late one, which funnily enough I bid in auction in BCA the week before. One of them. He bought it for $9,000, and I suspect that the battery is actually only going to be sort of 88, 89. Whereas I know that a Tesla, which is older, which is 50,000 miles, I would guess that the battery degradation would be worse. Yes, charging does affect it as well. But whenever I'm recommending anyone to buy an electric car, and certainly a Tesla, this doesn't really apply to Nissan Leaf, by the way, is that go for younger, higher mileage than lower mileage, older. That's the recommendation that I would give. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
I think the worst thing from seeing stats and stuff is that cars that just get left at 100% for long periods of time is worse for them, whereas actually just driving it is the thing.
So that's the same with
100%. You just need to drive it, though.
That's the same with ICE vehicles, though. I remember I'm touching on Polo G40 stuff here. Early on, when I got my car, there was a thing where there were a lot of them coming onto the second market, having been owned by the same, usually quite elderly couple elderly owner who'd gone in and bought a top spec Polo. And people were going, "Oh, I've got a Polo G40 completely standard with like 30,000 miles on it at 8 or 9 years," and this car was, ruined, like never been run up to temperature, it revved, incorrectly, all sorts of just stuff that you don't want with it. And it's that sometimes I think it is better to have a vehicle that's actually been used properly rather than something that's just been stuck and gathered dust all of its life. So
well, we've got Mod God. That is an amazing name. I love that name. That's brilliant. What are you going to do if there's a power car, as in I drive 10 miles to work, 20-mile round trip, Tesla banged about 15 superchargers at the shopping centre on my way through MacArthur Glen Cannock. Do you think it'll be okay? That's interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's two points there, but what are you going to do if there's a power cut thing always interests me, because I think
use my vehicle to load adapter to run my house.
Well, that's one aspect of it, and the other aspect of it is I had quite an interesting. There was I can't remember which of the social media sites it was on. Somebody was saying this to me, or what happens if there's a power cut? And I said, well, you won't be able to get fuel either. And he said, well, my local fuel station's got backup power. I said, well, then they'd be able to, if they've got chargers, you'd be able to charge there as well.
I'm just shocked that there's more than one MacArthur Glen as well.
I do not know that.
One in Bridgend.
No, there's at least two that I know of. Which is the other one? Yeah.
Well, a lot of these, you could argue some public chargers are run and powered in lots of different ways. And this is going to be the interesting thing. And I suppose this leads quite nicely onto the commercial fleet aspect. So I think we've covered quite a few things on the car side, is that everyone says, HGV, it's going to be hydrogen, van's going to be hydrogen, etc. But actually, in reality, the cost of infrastructure for hydrogen is just absolutely, it's so expensive, not just the infrastructure, but also the cost. And yes, there are projects out there where they're, electrolyzing to make the hydrogen in a green way and all the rest of it. But it does need to be supported by quite a few different businesses. And the problem with hydrogen vehicles isn't just, making the hydrogen and making it green, but also the cost of the vehicles. Because the vehicles, some people think that HGV electric vehicles are expensive, which they are. They're 2.5 times more expensive than a diesel one. But the hydrogen vehicles are even more expensive. And you think about the amount of electricity, green electricity that's needed to make the hydrogen, because they're 70%. There's 70% loss in the conversion. So I know that Alex has got his thoughts on hydrogen, and we've covered it on a recent live a couple of months ago. But the way that I see it, I mean, Europe, I think there'll be more, but in the UK, I just don't see more than a handful. I certainly don't think it's going to be scaled like a lot of the naysayers and a lot of the diehard negative EV people say. So I think the way that battery technology is improving, and the chemistry and the ranges and the power density, I think we're going to be absolutely safe with electric commercial fleets. And I'm going to be doing a video, not this week, probably the next, talking about how telematics of vehicles and fleet information can help understand charging vans and HGVs to make them work in situations, because the telematics and the fleet information can understand when these vehicles are stopped, because essentially these what's it called? God, I've gone blank. It must be a Sunday. Geofenced areas of depots can understand when these vehicles are entering depots, to understand where the opportunity is for charging. So not stopping to charge, but charge while they're stopped. But
that's the phrase that Sam uses, isn't it? Is charge, don't stop to charge, charge when.
That's what I did the other day.
Yeah, so
it's
120 miles before I have to stop. I must be getting old. I don't know about you guys. I have to stop. I've timed it every time. It's always 120 miles.
The UK is a slow country. I mean, journeys in the UK are really slow. I mean, there's you have to be an absolute nutter to get anywhere at any pace in the UK. Realistically, if you look at your average travel time, even if you think that you're getting from point to point quickly and you're mostly on the motorways, it's a struggle to average much more than about 55-60 miles per hour on a motorway journey in the UK, and that's on a clear route. So generally speaking, if you've got a vehicle, I mean, we know this from the Rifter. I mean, the Rifter will do 130 miles to a full charge, which is not a lot. I mean, I know that's a leap of faith for people, but with the kids on board, I mean, that's a couple of hours in the car. The kids want to get out and stretch legs, and by the time you plug it in, by the time the kids have got their shoes on and you've gone off and you've kind of taken it in turns, kind of sorting out toilet trips and whatever food they want to order, you're kind of ready to go again anyway. So
the kids don't wear shoes in the car?
No, all shoes come off as soon as they get in the car. On a long journey, all the shoes come off.
Is this like a OCD thing for you having your car clean, or is this?
No.
I don't think it makes them take them off at the doorway.
I wouldn't give myself that hard work by choice. I can tell you that.
There we go. Yeah. So like I was saying, there's software out there now that really can help understand complicated fleet operations and electrify. And I think the next couple of years it's going to be literally it's going to go like wildfire in terms of the infrastructure, private shared charging. There's so much going on at the moment which people probably don't see because it's going on in the background. It's going to be very, very interesting in a couple of years. I mean, I've spotted, I don't know about anybody else, whack it in the comments, but I've seen so many electric vans recently, and I know that there hasn't been that much progress in the van market, and the ZEV mandate for vans is, what is it, 16% of all vans need to be, I'm pretty sure it's 16% last year, or is it this year?
No, 10% last year. I think it's either 16 or 8. I'm trying to remember which way around it is. I think it's 28% for cars, 16% for vans.
Yeah, I think it's 16% this year. So 16% of all vans need to be registered as electric. And there's I think you're going to see more and more. But I think the reason why vans haven't been so popular is because people haven't got the infrastructure right, or they haven't chosen the right vehicle, and they just have not planned it. So I'm going off on a EV planning rant, because that's what I do as my 9 to 5. I apologize, I just can't help myself.
Regulations don't help though. So the biggest vans, the 3.5 to 4.25 ton vans, is where you've got a little bit of an extra issue, because as far as the government's concerned, they've sorted this out and they've got a licensing derogation that's permanent, which means you can drive those vehicles over 3.5 tons on a car license without doing any extra training or having another license. But you still have to have tachograph, you still have to have a speed limiter, you still have to have MOTs after 12 months. So they've kind of gone halfway towards saying these are not a problem, you can drive them on a car license, but they haven't gone all the way. And when you're trying to kind of encourage a market like that, I can kind of understand where they're coming from. That, you know, that they're kind of going, well, you want to have those extra safety checks and so on, but it adds a bit of a burden on top of, you know, other things if you can't use them exactly the same as a diesel van.
Yeah, and as Mod Scotsman said, you know, the early vans, the ranges were 80 miles. They weren't great.
Version, the original Transporter, was it ABT or something?
ABT, yeah.
So it was a conversion of a petrol one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really awful. I think there's a electrician company, Artisan, who helped me get over 1,000 subscribers a couple of years ago, had me on their challenge, etc. And they ran one, and they got stuck so many times. But there's vans out there now, like the new e-Sprinter, the Iveco e-Daily, quite a few that can actually do sort of 250 miles. Weight is the main factor. So, you know, you put you start towing something as well. These are the big challenges at the moment. So the last transport show that I was at this week, you know, you've got Department of Environmental. This is Department of Environmental Agency, something like that. They have got a massive challenge. They've got to electrify their whole fleet by 2027, and they have got all sorts of crazy interesting vehicles, including vehicles that need to be responding straight away and towing water pumps. So if there's a flood, they need to get out there. They need to tow this equipment. It could be one side of the country to the other. These are the real challenges, not the kind of everyday stuff. Yes, it's not going to work in every operation at the moment. I'm not saying it will, because I'm not, you know, completely blinkered in EV being the answer to everything, because it's not. But there are so many opportunities in van and HGV fleet. And there's quite an interesting, people might not know this, but with these brakes, you talk about tacho brakes, Alex, that HGV drivers have to have a 45-minute break. At the moment, HGV drivers cannot charge their vehicles in that 45 minutes. It does not count as a break. Whereas vans, it does. So there is a lot of regulation and a lot of criteria that needs to be updated to help this electric transition.
Is that the same with the 3.5 to 4.25 ton? Are they not counted as, because they've got a mix of HGV and LCV?
The way, as I understand it, the van, so LCV market, they are okay to charge in their 45-minute break, but anything HGV of a certain tonnage, I don't know the exact tonnage, I'll get it for next time. You cannot charge in that 45-minute break. It has to be counted as normal working hours, and that definitely needs to be changed to help the progression of HGV. But something that's amazing, really good news, which not many people know about, is if anyone's heard of Milence, it's a commercial public charging infrastructure, CPO, charge point operator in Europe. They have got a new petrol station going in near Hull, and as far as I'm aware, the cost of kilowatt hours is cheaper than a lot of the prices that people were talking just now. I think it's going to be sub 40 pence per kilowatt hour, which is going to be amazing to help the electrification in that area. And this is the key, you know, in that area, if there's a ultra rapid charging of that sort of money for HGV and vans, if that can be gone around the country, you know, the electrification of transport is just going to be, it's just going to be go like that. It's absolutely, you know, it's going to go like wildfire. Probably not the right term for EV, is it? Wildfire.
But I mean, we've said this before that any
EV
transition.
fire. Sorry.
We've said this before that any transition of vehicle types has bumps in the road. And this is just a bump in the road that people have kind of thinking, oh, it's all fail. It's not. It's just a bump in the road. As you get mass adoption, you have little hiccups with that. I mean, I think you had bumps in the road when they went from analog to digital TV, didn't they? Didn't one of the biggest companies that was doing it go bankrupt? Wasn't there a company called On Digital which set it up? And been bumps in the road with any technology transition.
There does seem to be so much resistance, and I think it's just kindled. Again, probably not the right word. Again, kindled by the mass kind of divide and tribalness that's been, that's kind of happening, and not just politically, but all the rest of it. It just seems so deep. Like, kill me before I get into an electric vehicle. It's a bit sad. It's like, and go drive one.
And you'll find a lot of these people haven't even driven one. And it's like, how can you comment on something you've not done? I wouldn't say I didn't like beef burgers if I'd never tried one. You can't. You have to try something, don't you?
I did with a child.
Equally, I've been around long enough to remember people being resistant to diesel and saying, "Oh, filthy, horrible diesel fuel, wouldn't drive that." And now all of a sudden, it's that kind of, "Oh, you're not taking my and I love my diesel, and it can go do, why would you buy an EV when you can buy a diesel?" And hybrids, bloody hybrids! I wouldn't touch a hybrid with a barge pole. And then all of a sudden, now it's like, the future I think is going to be hybrids, not EVs. And you just think, God, it's just, it keeps changing, doesn't it? It's a fluid thing. I don't understand the resistance. I just think it's allowing us to. It's more toys in the toy box, isn't it? It's more things for us to choose from. And I think, unfortunately, it's a shame that it's kind of been dragged into the whole culture war stuff, because it doesn't need to be at all.
Yeah. But so what do we think is behind the resistance? Big oil, jealousy, subsidies, safety, politics. I think it's a bit of everything, personally.
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's a sense of being told what to do that people don't like. And actually, if it was explained a little bit better, I think that might help in terms of, I think there's a kind of it's a bit like the kind of the NRA type scenario with the guns being taken off people in the States, isn't it? Although it's not the same thing, but it's that kind of resistance to, well, I want to be able to drive whatever I want to drive. People forget that they're already driving stuff that's heavily dictated by safety and environmental regulations. They're not going out and buying a carburetted vehicle. They're going out and buying something with electronic fuel injection and all the other bits and pieces. It's just an evolution of that. It's the same thing. But I think there's an awful lot of stuff about the media and kind of big oil subsidies and who's paying for the advertising in it. I don't think it's anything near as complicated or as kind of coordinated as that. I think, speaking from the inside, and I'm not necessarily defending this as the right way to do things, but there's an awful lot of pressure in terms of traffic and advertising and so on with a lot of these kind of titles. They're short-staffed, they're getting stories in that are attention grabbing, and they don't have the time always to kind of thoroughly check. And it's not because they're being funded by kind of dodgy advertising or anything. It's just they're trying to get traffic onto the website. And at the moment, anything about EVs catching fire or long queues or anything is being discussed, and it gets shared. And if you've got a story that does really well and it gets shared, that's good for bringing traffic onto your website. I don't think it's the right way necessarily to run things, but it's kind of the classic "if it bleeds, it leads" thing, isn't it? You put the big stories on your front page to get people to buy the magazine, the newspaper, and you're still doing it now with the website side of things. I don't think it's some coordinated big oil conspiracy. I think it's just reflective of the way things are in publishing at the moment, sadly.
Kev, what do you think?
I think again, it's, you say, marketing budgets and stuff. I mean, the thing that's telling for me is, have you seen the recent BP Pulse adverts? They mention in the BP Pulse advert for their EV charging, they say BP are primarily here for petrol and diesel, but if you need to charge, BP Pulse. And it's like, it's a marketing budget, because at the end of the day, these companies are all voted on by shareholders, and shareholders have big investments. So that kind of pushes the narrative a bit, doesn't it?
Mod Scotsman, literally nail on the head there. Why let the facts get in the way of a good story? It's clickbait. Everything seems to be run by clickbait at the moment. Hopefully, I'm not going to be tarnished with what I put the title EV
I was going
Live.
to say, as we've used the clickbaity title.
That's no comment. No, I thought it is relevant to what we're talking about at the end of the day, and I think we have covered quite a lot. Before I just tackle something that I think is quite relevant at the moment, is there any other lies that people want us to talk about and to discuss and just kind of dissect in a balanced way, of course, as we always do on YEV? But yeah, and another thing is also we're talking about, lies in the media and all the rest of it and what, feeds back from that. The amount of comments I've had on videos recently when I've been talking about Tesla, because obviously that's what I drive, is talking about, oh, I've got a swastika, or, oh, I've got a Model SS. And ironically, I never thought that the Chargeheads logo...
Oh, no.
I did at the time a couple of times, and a couple of times that people mentioned it, and I was thinking, no, it's just two lightning bolts as eyes. So yeah,
you're gonna have to rebrand.
As far as I'm concerned, all my older family members were in the good fight against what was the biggest evil in the whole wide world, and I think the same. And I've got some great stories, war stories, if anybody ever wants me to share with them, about my great uncle being shot down, and getting fake passports, going through France with the underground. Fantastic stories. And I live and die by those sort of stories, because that's how I grew up. And I think a lot of people tarnish people with these sort of comments, which is not only completely out of kilter, but yeah, it's just that bigger divide, isn't it? And I know the guys don't want to talk about that particular subject.
What you've got to think though is that person that you're referring to, he's not Tesla, he's not SpaceX, he's not Starlink. They've got lots of really, really clever engineers. He's just the face that's been associated with it. I mean, the companies generally don't have kind of an agenda like that. There's just a lot of clever engineers that just want to make cars, make a clever network that can.
Here's the thing. Most people don't know the political leanings of the heads of the car company that they buy things from, or the companies that they shop from on a daily basis, or the history of some of these brands. Lots of big companies have got all sorts of shady things in their skeletons in the closet. And the issue, I guess, with Elon Musk is he has tied himself so closely to Tesla that if he misbehaves, if he acts up, and I think he's prone to kind of just shooting from the hip with this stuff, that it does come back and impact on the brand in a way that it wouldn't with other brands, because the head of that company is not as much of a public face for it. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's I can kind of understand it, but also it's not fair to kind of then, you can't get too high and mighty on it unless you've done massive due diligence on whatever company you're buying cars or groceries or electronics or other bits and pieces from, because there's all sorts of shady things going on there.
I've heard rumors of like one car chief exec escaping in some sort of musical instrument case. So
what
you remember?
You
must remember that.
No, go on.
Really?
He's got connections to the EV industry as well. No? Carlos Ghosn, former head of Nissan, was escaped from house arrest in a Yamaha music case, didn't he? So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
there's all sorts of strange stories in the world of automotive.
There is absolutely. And on to slightly different. I don't know even what to call him. Just to mention Mod Scotsman's comment, I haven't seen any funny Daily Star front pages mentioning EVs yet, like Freddie Starr at my hamster.
I was going to say, was it Ozzy Osbourne when he bit the head off a bat?
Yeah,
but that is the story with that, was he thought it was someone had chucked a rubber one there and realized it was real, and then had to be hospitalized for like rabies shots and everything.
Freddie Starr at my charger. There we go. That'll be in the Star tomorrow.
Getting any fill-ins, that might be a bit shocking.
Yes.
I can see one coming up that I might need to talk about.
We get plenty of products from China, and don't think it's all rainbows and unicorns over there. No, well, you know, it is all mainly funded by the government, and we I think everyone knows which way they're I was just about to say slanting. That's probably not the right word. Should have been a Christmas EV quiz question. Yeah, we should have done that. Well, how many people still buy VWs and Beetles? It was the people's car designed by him with the small tash. Go on then, Alex.
So
Alex is a VW fan.
No, I think it's, again, I mean, there's issues, aren't there, with the other German manufacturers as well. I mean, the staff cars of the Nazi party all had a certain star logo on the front. I mean, there's an awful lot, again, but that plays exactly into the point I was going to make. Subaru, yeah. But yeah, it's one of those where I think, yeah, there's certainly mileage in that, but it was restarted. I mean, the company was restarted after, it was built back up by the Brits when they took over there. There's no defending the early history of it, but I think if you're going to get, if you're going to talk about ethics and kind of recent stuff, there's the whole diesel scandal last 10 years that you could perhaps be more offended by, and more, is more problematic, I think, than perhaps its early history, because that's so recent, and those cars, a lot of them still on the road. So again, it's a classic example. I mean, that didn't hurt Volkswagen in the long term, and they got all sorts of flack about, in the short term, after that, all that scandal broke nearly 10 years ago, about, there was all sorts of 2015.
Yeah, and weirdly, a lot of those cars are now going to go up to £20 road tax when EVs go up to 195.
Or 600 for some of them, yeah.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. I better redo my tax on the Tesla in a week or two. And just to mention, if anyone's got a Tesla Model 3 and they want some IBAC lowering springs, I've got a free giveaway this week on Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. Wednesday at 8:00. Giveaway IBAC lowering springs. If anybody wants to chav their motor, make it McDonald's special. Here we go. Oh yeah, that's a good one actually. DeLorean was really shady. And look how much love there is for those still. That's a very good point.
I'm trying to figure out, because this is the wrong way around. There's masses of them over there. Because it's not mirrored, I find it really hard to adjust. That's 10 tons of DeLoreans on the shelves behind me. So
far too far away. I think, we're coming to the normal. We're coming to the normal hour close. I think we could probably extend on this for next week. And I've got another topic that I'd like to discuss. So, and normally do keep to an hour, unless people next week tell us that we need to stay on for longer. Do a Joe Rogan style for 3 hours, chaps. What do you reckon? Probably not, because we've got work commitments. But yeah, my work colleague, here we go. Dean's put, my work colleague gleefully asked me about my VD increasing to 195 a year when his 2017 2.1 diesel Mercedes is £30 a year. Where's it's the common sense thing, isn't it? It's just, it just makes no sense whatsoever. But
again, it's badly implemented legislation, which was carried over from after an election, because it's not the current government that implemented that. That was implemented.
It was always going to happen. It's the VED stuff that I think. Did you? I don't know if you saw. I did a story about this a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that the average, it was Alphabet, the average lease cost for an EV was something like 58 grand versus 51,000 for across the board. So the average list price of the EVs on they're registered new last year, and 80% of all of their lease vehicles are over 40 grand. So that threshold needs to move full stop, not just for EVs. But yeah, for it to, I can understand the 195, but the expensive car supplement, and they're saying they're going to change it. But I mean, we're at the end of February now. We're only a few weeks away from the start of the tax year, and nobody knows what they're going to adjust it to, or if they're going to adjust it, or when they're going to adjust it. It's nuts, absolutely crazy.
No, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, let's end it there and tune in. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Don't forget to share it. And we'll be here next week talking about the same sort of stuff. So, plug in for next week. And thank you very much for listening. And it's goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye from me.
See you later, guys. Take care.